Vikings, let's win this game.
Vikings fans, things are heating up in Minnesota. Buckle up. There is a major decision looming involving the departure of one of the most important names on this defense. A new leader could rise on the back end. The secondary is targeting a veteran reinforcement. But does that actually fix the issue or just patch a hole? On offense, a financial decision is pointing toward a potential shift in the franchise's future, and there is a possible move that could completely change this team's direction. And the final story in this sequence, that one hits this team right where it matters this year. Let's get to it. Sometimes you can just feel when an era is reaching its limit. There is no official announcement, no dramatic press conference. It is just that feeling in the air. The Vikings defense may be on the verge of losing one of the biggest pillars of its recent history. Harrison Smith has not officially decided on retirement. His contract has expired. The silence continues. And knowing him, he has already said we might only realize it when it simply happens. That stings, because he is not just a safety, he is leadership, film study, football IQ, respect on and off the field. But the front office cannot afford to sit around and wait. While that decision hangs in the balance, a strong name has surfaced behind the scenes. Minkah Fitzpatrick. Yes, that Minkah Fitzpatrick. 5-time Pro Bowl selection, battle-tested experience, and real reports that the Miami Dolphins are listening to trade offers. Miami has started a roster reset. They have moved on from veteran pieces. They are reorganizing, and when a team enters that phase, opportunities open up. Fitzpatrick is 29 years old. He still has plenty left in the tank. He finished last season as one of the highest-graded safeties in the league. He has played both free safety and closer to the line of scrimmage. He brings versatility, instincts, and something that fits perfectly here, tactical intelligence. There is another layer to this. Brian Flores already knows him well. They have worked together. There is no bad blood. In fact, there have been public compliments. That matters in any potential deal. Picture Fitzpatrick playing deep, reading the quarterback, commanding the secondary. Something similar to what we saw in the best stretches of Harrison Smith's career. You do not simply replace a legend. That is not how this works. But you can transition wisely. I understand people who think it is too early to even talk about this, but the team has to think ahead. The defense cannot lose its identity, especially under a coaching staff that thrives on aggression and disguised coverages. This is real fan analysis, the kind you do not always get from cold breakdowns. If the trade cost is reasonable, it makes sense. A lot of sense. Now I want to hear from you. Drop it in the comments. Would Fitzpatrick be the right successor? Because if this move happens, it reshapes the entire defensive structure. And it could just be the start of a chain reaction that affects much more than the secondary. And stay with me, because the next story shifts straight to the financial side of the offense. Before we move on, quick favor, subscribe to the channel. It is completely free and it helps grow this community in a big way. Now let's keep rolling. When you rewatch last season's games, one thing stands out. The Vikings secondary struggled when the slot could not lock things down. That became an easy target on third down. There is no way around it. That is where a name comes in that might not grab flashy headlines but solves a real problem. Mike Hilton, a veteran, tough, a true slot specialist, the kind of corner who disrupts routes and forces mistakes. He also shows up on blitzes when you least expect it. Pro Football Focus listed Minnesota as one of the best landing spots for him. And it makes sense when you look at Brian Flores' system. Hilton is not just a cover guy. He is a pressure piece. He understands snap timing. He attacks open space. He fits perfectly into a scheme that thrives on confusing quarterbacks. Of course, there is the age factor. He will hit free agency at 32 years old. This is not a long-term rebuild piece. It is an immediate solution. And sometimes that is exactly what a team needs. A ready-made player, no long development curve. And here is the key detail. Bringing in Hilton is not just about him. It is about freeing up Byron Murphy Jr. to play where he is most effective. In 2025, Murphy struggled more in the slot. On the outside, he looked much more comfortable. If you bring in a true slot specialist, you stabilize the entire secondary. That shifts the defense's dynamic. Clearer roles, cleaner communication, a better structure. And this coaching staff thrives when every piece knows exactly where it belongs. Let me say this plainly. This is not a flashy signing. It is a structural one. And structure wins tight games in December. Every defensive move connects to the rest of the roster. The team has major offensive decisions approaching. When you add here and adjust there, the front office has to balance everything carefully. So think about it. If Minnesota brings in Hilton, the secondary gains immediate stability. It does not solve everything, but it builds a foundation. And sometimes a solid base allows you to take bigger swings elsewhere. Because the next story is not about tactical fit, it is about a major decision. A decision involving a young offensive name that could shift the franchise's direction. There is a deadline that has people restless in Minnesota, May 1st. By that date, the team must decide whether to exercise the fifth-year option on a young offensive talent. And when you reach that kind of crossroads, it is not just about performance. It is about salary cap space, roster planning, and off-field complications. That brings us to Jordan Addison. Addison has delivered solid production in his first seasons. He has shown up in key moments, but he has not yet posted that 1,000-yard season that ends all debate. And the complication is that the conversation does not stay between the sidelines. There is off-field history. That weighs heavily on decision makers. It weighs on the front office, it weighs on the coaching staff, and it weighs on fans who just want stability. There's a very honest angle to this debate. With Justin Jefferson already carrying a massive cap hit in 2026, Minnesota cannot spend recklessly. There are holes at center, at cornerback, at safety. You cannot fix that with optimism alone. Here is where it gets complicated. If this were purely about production, many fans would check yes and move forward. But speaking very clearly now, the math is not that simple. A fifth-year option means a significant guaranteed commitment down the road. And once you exercise that option, you're also stepping closer to extension talks. And that price can rise quickly. There is another path that people hesitate to say out loud, a trade. Moving Addison before the decision. It is not confirmed, but it is a conversation that naturally surfaces when roster priorities stack up. You also cannot evaluate Addison without looking at who is behind him. Jalen Nailor could be in line for a substantial contract on the open market. There are projections pointing toward a strong payday. If that happens, the offensive equation shifts. Jefferson with a major cap hit. Addison facing an option decision. Nailor potentially cashing in elsewhere. Suddenly, what felt like depth can start looking thin. It is almost ironic. Just when everything seems under control, the National Football League reminds you how quickly things can change. The point is this: the Addison decision is about more than one player. It is about offensive identity. It is about how much you are willing to invest in two wide receivers while rebuilding a defense. Now I want your take. Drop it in the comments. Do you pick up Addison's option without hesitation, or would you redirect those resources? Because depending on that yes or no, the next discussion moves straight into the most volatile position in football, quarterback. You know how a rumor starts as smoke and suddenly turns into real conversation? That is exactly what is happening with the quarterback position in Minnesota. And this is not just about adding a backup, it is about a move that could shift the locker room dynamic. The name at the center of speculation is Kyler Murray. His situation in Arizona remains uncertain. If the Cardinals cannot find a trade partner, a release becomes part of the discussion. If that happens, a quarterback of that caliber hitting the market becomes tempting for multiple teams. The question is whether it makes sense for the Vikings. The biggest factor is fit with Kevin O'Connell. Field Yates spoke about this on the Mina Kimes show. He pointed out that Murray's style differs from the traditional archetype O'Connell has thrived with. Murray is improvisation, explosion, a quarterback who creates outside structure. O'Connell's system leans heavily on timing and rhythm. Still, the argument is straightforward. The team does not want another season where quarterback play holds them back. Based on what we know right now, Murray would represent an upgrade in terms of proven production. That brings us to J.J. McCarthy. The current plan is for him to lead, but the National Football League does not honor clean plans. If you bring in a high-profile veteran, you create real competition. That can accelerate growth, or it can create pressure that fractures confidence, and that divides those who live and breathe Vikings football. Alec Lewis added another key layer. Everything depends on Murray's contract situation. If he is released, he can choose his path. He might seek long-term financial security elsewhere. Teams with significant cap space could offer that, or he might take a short-term prove-it deal in a strong situation to reset his market value. That is where Minnesota becomes intriguing. There is talent here. There is an offensive-minded head coach. There is infrastructure. But there is risk. Bringing Murray in directly impacts McCarthy's future, it impacts fan patience, and it impacts long-term cap planning. Personally, I do not hate the idea of a short-term Murray gamble. I do not fully embrace it either. I just see the ceiling it creates. He raises the upside, but the floor can get slippery. If it does not work, it becomes a storyline that drags on. So the real question is this: does Minnesota want fierce competition at quarterback right now, Or do they want to protect McCarthy's development and strengthen the roster around him? Because the next scenario takes this entire discussion and pushes it toward chaos. It centers on J.J. McCarthy and a potential trade that could make your stomach turn. Let me tell you something. Some rumors you hear and immediately dismiss. Others you hear and feel uneasy about even if they are not confirmed, because their existence alone signals something about perception. The center of this conversation is J.J. McCarthy. A scenario has surfaced suggesting Minnesota could trade McCarthy to the New York Jets. Yes, the New York Jets, a franchise constantly searching for stability at quarterback. The argument behind this scenario is blunt. The Vikings may be in win-now mode and unwilling to wait through developmental struggles. But here is the uncomfortable truth. The organization chose him. They committed to that direction. When a franchise appears to second-guess itself quickly, the market senses vulnerability, and speculation intensifies. The scenario paints a difficult 2025 season. Injuries, inconsistency, questions. It suggests Minnesota could move him while value still exists. That is harsh. But patience is rarely abundant in the National Football League. Then the conversation shifts to compensation. What would the Jets offer? They hold multiple premium draft selections in upcoming years. The speculation centers around something like a second-round pick plus additional assets. It is not an overwhelming haul, which leads to tough questions. If the return is modest, why move on? If the price climbs, why would the Jets pay it? Speaking very clearly now, these rumors always carry two layers. One is the player's reality, the other is fan anxiety. And quarterback anxiety runs deep. When you get it right, you soar. When you get it wrong, you wander for years. From the Jets' perspective, they would have time, young pieces, a longer runway. They could develop McCarthy without immediate pressure. Meanwhile, Minnesota would pivot toward immediate alternatives. That could happen through a veteran acquisition or a future draft class. There is even chatter about targeting someone like Mac Jones as a contingency option. At that point, the conversation begins to feel patchwork, and patchwork quarterback solutions rarely end well. Vikings fans have lived through enough roller coasters. Stability is the goal. Clarity is the goal. And rumors of trading your young quarterback pour fuel on an already active fire. But these scenarios surface because pressure exists. The roster has talent ready to compete. The coaching staff faces expectations. The fan base will not accept endless waiting, so the larger question becomes identity. What does Minnesota want to be over the next few seasons? The answer to that question connects every story we discussed. This is the kind of offseason that tests your pulse. You see the potential farewell of Harrison Smith and immediately hear Minkah Fitzpatrick's name as a possible successor. Then Mike Hilton enters the conversation as a stabilizing force in the slot. On offense, the Jordan Addison decision becomes a battle between talent and cap flexibility, and the quarterback position erupts into speculation with Kyler Murray linked and J.J. McCarthy's future debated. I will say it clearly. If Minnesota gets two of these decisions right, this team changes tiers. If they miss, the consequences will linger. Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you are someone who lives and breathes Vikings football, this space is for you. What concerns you the most right now? Stay tuned. SKOL Vikings, let's go.